Okay, now if you could take your seat.
Seat?
Let me do. Don't worry, everything's moved here for us.
Here, right over here.
Gentlemen, this way.
Right here.
Oh, nice place. You don't believe it, huh?
I know, it's quite impressive, huh?
Quite the view, huh?
That's the Statue of Liberty, of course, Liberty Island. And Ellis Island here, the famous Ellis Island where all the immigration came in.
Yeah?
And the New York Harbor. This is Brooklyn. On the left,
Oh, island. Yeah.
Let me start by saying we're proud that the World Trade Center itself is the site of the Intel World Chess Championship. We at the Trade Center welcome you here today, and all the fans of chess who will be watching this very exciting competition, which will soon be taking place here on the observation deck. Once again, we extend our thanks to both the players, the organizers, the participants, and ultimately the viewers of this world-class event here at the deck.
Chess is absolutely so lucky to have not just number one and number two, but also these two great spokesmen for the game. They're good looking, they're articulate, they're fun. So we're extraordinarily lucky to have not just the two best, but these two guys. We're lucky to have the fact that these two guys are the two best in the world right now, because they're both wonderful people.
I'm glad to see there's so much interest in this match, and I hope we have some fun watching this match. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just hope that Visha and myself will be good enough to play at the level of the organization of that match and to contribute a great chess to the history of this game. Thank you very much.
Garry in the air, if you would call it, heads or tails, and then depending upon who wins the coin toss, they will choose a tower. The respective players will go to their tower. Mr. Marlin will assist the player on the left. I will assist who's ever on the right here in terms of the tower. And we will lift the towers and see which queen is under which.
Heads.
Garry, call it in the air.
Heads.
It's on the floor. It's tails. Choose one of the two towers.
I'll go with this one.
That one. 1, 2, 3. There we are. Vishy has white. Garry has black.
Intel presents the 1995 World Chess Championship. There have been many dramatic sights for the World Chess Championship in its long and illustrious history, but none have reached the heights of this year's breathtaking setting.
Hello and welcome to the top of the World Trade Center, site of the 1995 Intel World Chess Championship, where world champion Garry Kasparov is defending his title against the number 2 player in the world, Viswanathan Anand. I'm Maurice Ashley, and with me is Grandmaster Daniel King. Now, Danny, Kasparov has been champion for 10 straight years. Can he still turn it on?
You know, he's arguably the strongest player of all time. And just in this past year, he's been on tremendous form. So I think he can still do it.
Anand, the speed king of India, has also been on fabulous form. He's been playing really well this year.
He beat some of the strongest players in the world to get to this final. And just in the last couple of years, his style has really developed. So this is going to be a great final.
It is a match of 20 games. The maximum game time is 7 hours. Each player has a certain amount of time to complete all their moves. Each win is worth 1 point. 10.5 points wins the match.
Anand is one of the world's most exciting players. He calculates at a phenomenal speed, and his style has really matured over the last couple of years.
Obviously, I have an overall strategy for the match, but I suspect there's a fair amount of learning to be done since this is still my first match, and all sorts of situations will arise that I haven't faced before. So I think the best thing is just look forward to it and leave it at that.
Kasparov is arguably the greatest player of all time. He's coming to tremendous form over the past year. He's ready for his challenger.
He's a good player, and I have to admit that this player is much more solid and more stable than Nigel Short in 1993. And I think it will be a very, very, very tough challenge. And as a faster player than I am, I have no doubt about this. And he can try to show his speed superiority in this match. I don't care about this, as long as I can guarantee that I'll have enough time to make high-quality moves.
The match is being held on the 107th floor on the observation deck at the World Trade Center in a glass-enclosed booth. Game 1 began. Anand had white in the first game, and he started with his traditional move, e4.
And Kasparov played his favorite opening move, the Sicilian defense, pawn up to c5.
Over 350 journalists from around the world in attendance. Anand trying not to be nervous in this his first game of the World Championship match, playing against a powerhouse player, very experienced Garry Kasparov.
So this position still home preparation. It's been seen many times before. Typical Sicilian defense. Pawn coming up into the center there. Pawn to d6.
Kasparov looking quite relaxed, and if we switch to the Intel graphics, we see Anand darting his pawn forward, Kasparov capturing, and a knight taking in the center of the board, knight jumping out to f6.
So that pawn in the center of the board being attacked and defended, and this is the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. Kasparov's favorite. He's had tremendous success with this in World Championship matches, but now the pawn coming to a4, and that's preventing black expanding on the queen side with the b pawn there.
A very kind of passive way to play this opening. This is not the biggest attacking line in this variation, then.
It's more, he's controlling the play. I wouldn't say it's passive. Anand is controlling the position rather than going for a big punch straight away.
Or bringing out their pieces are the players, and Kasparov castling there and pushing his pawn forward, looking to thrust aggressively was Anand.
Well, this has been seen many times before, and indeed in World Championship matches. And Kasparov playing his rook into the center of the board there. Anand's looking pretty calm at the moment, but the rook coming into the center of the board, looking down potentially at those bishops and white's center pawn.
Anand just calmly bringing his queen up to d2, a novel idea in this position, trying to be very solid, bringing his rook over, just centralizing all his pieces, being aggressive in the center.
So both sides have developed all their pieces, but you can see there's a kind of no man's land in the middle of the board. There seems to be no contact. The rook coming into the center, opposite white's queen there, so that if there are any tactics, then white's queen could be in trouble.
If we turn to look at it from black's point of view, we see that black is very hunched up in the first three ranks, trying to be defensive, but this formation can also spring back and be aggressive, so Anand has to be careful.
That's right. If one of the white pawns crosses that no man's land in the middle of the board, then the black pieces could really explode. There we see the pieces behind the first three ranks, but they could shoot out at any moment.
Still playing very cagely with both sides in the opening, just trying to get their bearings in the first few moves, and Anand now switching his queen over, attacking on the long diagonal, attacking the b pawn.
But of course, this can be defended pretty easily by Kasparov by moving the knight back. There we go, and that the knight defends the pawn. So a testing move, but Kasparov, he's up to it.
Still, Kasparov continuing to develop. Both players now, the bishop going on the diagonal, the strong diagonal, and then he whipped off this move. Anand, bishop to h5, attacking the pawn on f7. This is a very new idea.
Now, if we look at this, the bishop bearing down on that pawn on f7, and this creates very dangerous threats. Kasparov must be so careful in this position. Anand threatening to push one of the pawns forward and explode the position around Kasparov's king. And this was a great defensive idea. Defending the pawn there, attacked by the bishop with the rook, a very careful move.
And after a couple of exchanges in the center of the board, Kasparov seemed to neutralize the advantage that Anand had developed by placing his bishop on a wonderful diagonal facing off against the white bishop.
And now he's pushed forward in the center. That center pawn, a very good idea. So Kasparov, he's crossed that barrier in the middle of the board and he's gained a central square. So white pawn capturing, and now that bishop stands perfectly in the center of the board.
And by neutralizing the effort of the white pieces, Kasparov was able to better his position. Now his pieces standing very nicely in the center of the board, controlling a lot of key squares, and it looked as if black had taken over the control of this game.
That's right, the knight and the bishop looking very powerful indeed. And now Kasparov played such a surprising move. He played the pawn up to a5, which looked at first sight to be crazy because it's weakened that b5 square. White's knight could potentially hop in there, but his judgment is very fine.
And Kasparov now looking to see whether or not he could get a real advantage. But Anand went on the defensive. Kasparov deciding to play very, very solidly in this last few moves. And Anand accepting the draw offer, so game one was history.
A solid start from both players. Anand tried to attack, but when it didn't work, he regrouped, and Kasparov felt he didn't have enough advantage to play for a win.
Well, the players in a glass-enclosed booth, but down the hall, a nice crowd has gathered for the start of game two. This game, Garry started with the white pieces. The players came out ready after a draw in the initial game.
Question was, would Kasparov with white go all out for the win?
Anand feeling very confident after his first game, saying that in the press conference earlier, and now Kasparov getting ready, and the game was off. Kasparov opening with the move pawn to d4.
Previously, he's played pawn to e4 against Anand, so this may be a slight surprise.
And Anand studying the position and finally bringing his knight out to f6. Typical of Anand, one of his favorite defenses. Wasn't clear exactly how Kasparov was to continue, yet he lunged forward with c4.
So all pretty standard stuff. The pawn's coming forward, gaining control of very good center squares, and this may be a slight surprise. Anand often plays the pawn out to g6, fianchettoing his bishop, but now we have a Nimzo Indian defense. That bishop coming out, pinning the knight on c3. And this, slightly unusual, the queen coming out into the center of the board. It's been seen before, but, well, a little bit of a surprise.
Well, Kasparov responded quickly to this variation, nevertheless, despite the surprise value, and then after an exchange on c3, Kasparov took back with the bishop on c3.
Yeah, slightly unusual again. Often it's better to recapture with the pawn, strengthen the center. And now that bishop coming into the center of the board and attacking it with the knight. There we go, knight takes bishop threatened.
Now after an exchange on f6, Kasparov had fractured Anand's structure. Kasparov looking for a way to get in after having weakened the pawn position around Anand's king.
So the knight coming out there, threatening to hassle black's queen in the center of the board. Now Kasparov played a very careful move, that pawn move, preventing black's knight coming down.
And the queen centralizing herself, the black queen looking very powerful. After a knight move, the pawn moved up, and then the king castled on the left-hand side of the board.
So Anand following suit, he's also castled on the queen side. Let's look at it from black's point of view.
And now black with a fairly solid position. Right about now, all the experts had agreed that black had basically equalized this position. His queen was very powerful in the center of the board.
Yeah, it's that queen that makes me feel that Anand's position is fine here. Kasparov playing his pawn up, maybe looking to develop his bishop.
And he has done so, and now Anand leaping back with his knight, preparing to bring his pieces into the center. Anand looking very confident. Kasparov wanting to win with the white pieces. He's such a big hitter. He's like Pete Sampras with the serve when he has white. Now not too happy with this situation, because the position seemed to be evening out just a bit.
And there, the bishop wants to come down onto that superb diagonal. Kasparov actually forcing an exchange of queens here, which, well, he doesn't seem to be making much of the white pieces here.
An amazing decision by Kasparov. It's such a big-time attacking player to exchange the queens. Didn't seem to make sense, but Anand was only happy to oblige by also exchanging rooks and offering further exchanges along the D-line, and this really helped Anand to neutralize white's advantage.
That's right. In this position, the pawn structure's almost symmetrical. Perhaps Kasparov has an infinitesimal advantage, but it's not going to be enough to win the game. Kasparov bringing his king up, if he can gain entry into black's position with that king, superbly centralized king, that's a different story. But Anand playing very carefully, not allowing the king entry into his position.
So Anand content to stay back, but there was no way for Kasparov to penetrate. And after a few more moves and a few Kasparov feints, it didn't really seem as if he was getting anywhere.
Anand defending very coolly indeed. Didn't seem like he was under too much pressure.
No pressure at all was Anand. He knew how to handle this position, and Kasparov glancing at the clock, wondering how he was going to win this second game, but it didn't seem as if he was going to make much headway in this situation. Not much to do when you have only a few pieces, and Kasparov looking a bit frustrated.
You know, Kasparov has got to be pretty disappointed with this game. He's got the white pieces, but he didn't make anything of it at all. Normally, he'd go all out for the attack, but here, he's hardly tested Anand.
Prior to this game, Kasparov had defeated Anand 4 consecutive times with the white pieces. So for Anand, this is some kind of victory in being able to fend off the powerful attack of Kasparov, and the game ended in a draw.
This is a confident performance from Anand, and he's got to be happy going into the rest day.
Game 3, Anand with the white pieces trying to crack through Kasparov's defenses. And Danny, after the rest day, Anand had to be feeling pretty good.
He's drawn the first 2 games and played himself into this final, and many people expected him to have a real go at Kasparov today.
And he began with his traditional move, pawn to e4, and Kasparov, as expected, was ready to respond with c5. It seemed as if they were both going to repeat the moves from game 1.
So who would be the first to vary?
Yeah, somebody's got to blink in this situation, and Anand continuing right ahead with knight to f3, attacking in the center of the board.
So obviously on the rest day, both teams had really been preparing hard. A lot of analysis has taken place. So here we go. Pawn out to d4, black captured, and the white knight recaptured.
And all the moves looking just the same, playing the very same moves from game 1 there. Bishop e2 being played, all the exact same moves. Anand castling, just a slight variance there, but he ended up getting right back into the exact same situation with a4.
There we go, the knight coming out, the bishop coming out, just protecting the knight in the center of the board, black castling, and the pawn coming up to f4. All as in game 1, but it was here that Anand sprung the first new move.
The first new move of the game, deep in thought, was Anand, and here he stopped for a few seconds before whipping out the important novelty, bishop to d3, an aggressive move, Danny.
That's right, the bishop pointing down at black's king, and so he seems to have really come out fighting in this third game.
Whipping out a good opening novelty, and Kasparov quick to respond with knight to b4 attacking the bishop, but after a5 by Anand, Kasparov's queen side was under a lot of pressure.
The knight, white knight coming round, looking at black's king side. It might throw itself on g5 there.
Very aggressive play by Anand. Now bishop to b6 attacking the queen, and Kasparov looking a bit concerned at this new way of playing. Kasparov wondering what was going on as Anand made it clear his intention was to attack Kasparov's king.
And he's a little bit baffled, and he's played his queen back 1 square to the back rank. He's preparing to knock the black bishop out of the way, and the queen coming around to a very aggressive post, looking at black's king.
And now the bishop lining up on the d4 square, looking to attack down near black's king, the bishop and the queen in concert, and Anand beginning to feel this position looking very tasty indeed.
You can see him, his eyes on the right side of the board, looking at Kasparov's king. Forget the other side. Look, the queen attacking the king there.
Threatening checkmate in 1, and Kasparov played a very surprising move, f6, and e5 was played, and now a beautiful sacrifice, a threat possible with this strong bishop, Danny.
Well, this just blows the position open, and Kasparov had not anticipated this pawn move, and he looks terrified.
Anand just walking off, very confident in the position, thinking about the fact that maybe he's going to win the first game of his first World Championship match, and Kasparov in deep trouble.
And you can see it on his face there, and it took a long time for him to find a proper defense.
He spent a long time in this position, finally played rook to f8, but that should not have solved his problems, and in this position, Anand could have whipped out a sacrifice and taken down on the f6 square first, and then capture on h7, sacrificing his bishop. That would have led to a winning attack.
It turns out that, it would have been winning, but instead, Anand, he missed it, and he captured the knight instead. But he played for the attack in a different way. He moved his bishop out, looking at black's king on g8, and Kasparov was still worried. There we go, the bishop bearing down on black's king. Kasparov had to block that attack with his own bishop.
But now, after blocking the attack and missing the moment, was Anand, and here Kasparov driving the bishop back and chasing the bishop all around the chessboard. It was relegated to the side of the board, and Kasparov bringing his knight back.
But that bishop could still be the key to Anand's attack. It can still drop back one square and look at black's king. And now it was at this moment where Anand should surely have recaptured that pawn in the center of the board with his pawn. Instead, he chose to capture with the knight. Although his queen is still in an attacking position, too many pieces were exchanged.
With all these exchanges, Kasparov was very much relieved, and his queen leaping into the game, protecting the position very well. Anand having to drop back, and then a couple of exchanges occurred on the f-file.
So Kasparov has managed to exchange pieces, and with every exchange that occurs, Anand's attack diminishes, and Kasparov is over the worst.
So starting out very aggressive was Anand. A couple of moves now, just pure exchanges, and so many pieces off the board. It's very difficult for Anand to make any headway. And Kasparov still defending accurately, advancing his pawn. There, Anand bringing his bishop to the back rank, but there wasn't much to play for in this game anymore.
So now more exchanges occurring, Kasparov checking, Anand can parry that very easily with his queen, and after the exchange we're left with an endgame where the pawns are exactly equal and each side has a bishop, but they're so-called bishops of opposite color. They run on opposite colored squares, and this makes a draw inevitable.
With nothing to play for, the players finally did agree on a draw, and the third game was over. The match still tied at 1.5, 1.5.
I saw it was very dangerous. You know, I didn't like very much my position, but you know, I didn't have much choice after e5.
So this has got to go down as a missed opportunity for Anand. Kasparov has got to be pretty relieved at holding the draw.
Danny, on day 4, expectations were high for a fierce battle.
After 3 draws, the crowd wanted blood, and they were confident that Kasparov was going to deliver.
No question about it, and with game 4, Kasparov with the white pieces, and after narrowly missing death in the previous game, Kasparov needed to win this game to regain his confidence and his domination in the match.
But his opening move was somewhat surprising. He played his knight out to the f3 square, a very cautious start indeed.
Not typical Garry Kasparov, not the Garry Kasparov of 10 years certainly, who would bang out the pawns in the center of the board and try to just rip his opponent's head off.
And responding in kind, also bringing his knight out to f6.
Very calm start by the two players. Kasparov seeming as if he wanted to test the waters, and now playing c4, a move he does not frequently play. And Danny, this kind of start really doesn't look like he's trying to do anything in the beginning.
Well, who knows? He perhaps wants to build up the tension here and only later on in the game go for his opponent.
Well, he whipped his knight out to the c3 square, influencing the center. Anand countering with bishop to b4.
So the bishop looking at the knight on c3. You never know, it might capture and damage white's pawn structure.
Well, continuing to develop quickly, the bishop now going to g2, Kasparov. And there was this pawn center, and then suddenly Kasparov made this queen move, Danny.
So the queen threatening the bishop and Anand moving his pawn out to defend the bishop.
Quickly castling was Kasparov, giving Anand a wide choice of moves, and considering his situation here, not wanting to lose this game, especially after missing a win yesterday, Anand trying to be very careful in this situation.
So Anand has this strong pawn center. You see those two pawns controlling many central squares, and Kasparov, he's just hanging back. So at the moment, it's as though Anand has a slight initiative.
Very strange indeed, and now Anand bringing his rook to the open line, and a3 by Kasparov attacking the bishop.
Now Anand has captured, so white's queen is attacked here, so Kasparov first has to recapture the pawn. There we go, pawn takes pawn, and now he must decide what to do with the bishop. He's taken the knight.
And there we see Kasparov, who likes to leave the room, and his opponent's move quickly returning to the board.
Now Kasparov, he's got to decide how to recapture the bishop. He's taken with the queen. That's much better. He would have damaged his pawn structure otherwise. So he must now try and break open the position for that bishop on c1, we can see it there. If that can enter into the game successfully, then Kasparov will have a great position with the bishop on the long diagonal.
Well, after b4, Anand quickly responded with e4, chasing the knight out of the position, and then queen to e7, bolstering that e-pawn in the center of the board, but Kasparov attacking black's knight.
And now that black knight has possibilities to come into some of the weakened squares in Kasparov's camp.
Kasparov responding quickly and then leaving the room again, leaving Anand to wonder what was going on. Had he in fact lost a pawn, but then a spectacular knight sacrifice.
This is superb. The knight coming into f3, checking the white king. White must capture this knight, but then Anand captures the white knight in the center board. Now Anand is a whole pawn down, but his pieces are so active. There we go. He's just about to recapture that bishop in the center. But his pieces are very active, and Kasparov has a weak pawn on c4, which gives Anand compensation.
The weak pawn on c4 and also the weak squares around the bishop, and Kasparov not at all happy. Look at that pained expression on his face. He had blown a great chance to get an advantage, and he didn't want to draw yet another game, but what could he do about it?
So Anand, he's just playing his bishop out there, looking at that weak pawn on c4. This is what gives him counterplay. It's very difficult.
And Kasparov offering a draw for their fourth draw in a row.
Let's take a look at the last couple of moves. The bishop coming out to e6, hitting the weak pawn on c4. And this is what gives black counterplay. It's very easy just to bring the rooks into the middle and then to line up with the queen and bishop against the pawn, and white really can't break free, can't develop any play at all.
Anand successfully neutralizing Kasparov's advantage. Many were doubtful of whether or not Kasparov would continue, but Anand after the game was pretty confident of the result.
I wasn't sure really what to expect. I mean, you can play a few more moves and not for a draw then, but I feel it's basically equal. I mean, at some point I'm going to double on the d file, so he either will let me rook d3 or he'll have to swap now. And once he swaps one pair, I don't see how he can do anything.
So the score was now deadlocked at 2-2, and Kasparov had this to say about the 20-game format.
This is not a traditional World Championship match, you know. I played with Karpov. First match was a, unlimited match. I mean, forget about this. But all the matches I played before, it was an old-fashioned 24 games event, 3 games a week with the Germans. Now we play 20 games match, which is 4 games shorter. It's a significant cut. You know, we play 4 games a week. No, we, as I said, was no Germans, and that also puts me in quite in a difficult situation, because I never used to such a pace of the event, and Anand has a better preparation, because he played a very short matches, shorter than the World Championship match, but he used to play a few games in a row. I didn't play this in my matches, and I'm not used to this kind of the event.
In 1972, the great American chess player Bobby Fischer became an instant folk hero and chess superstar by winning the World Championship. 2 decades later, another hero, world champion Garry Kasparov, would successfully defend his title against Englishman Nigel Short and prove once again that he was the best chess fighter in the world. Now in 1995, the World Trade Center in New York finds Kasparov doing battle once more, his title under assault from a new challenger, the young and dangerous Viswanathan Anand from India. 2 mighty giants have come to decide who will be king. Intel presents the 1995 World Chess Championship. Welcome to the 1995 Intel World Chess Championship on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center, where world champion Garry Kasparov is defending his title against challenger Viswanathan Anand. I'm Maurice Ashley, and with me is Grandmaster Danny King. Danny, after a week of play, the score is deadlocked at 2-2.
Kasparov has started this match so cautiously, and I think we're yet to see him at his best. So this week, I'm hoping he's going to come out with a really big punch.
Well, playing in his first World Championship is Viswanathan Anand at age 25. And Denny, this guy has nerves of steel.
He's played himself into this match so well, and that's not easy against an opponent as intimidating as Garry Kasparov.
Well, last week, the players had 4 consecutive draws.
It was real cat and mouse stuff, but now they've played themselves in, I'm sure they're going to go for it.
Well, after a weekend's rest, Game 5. Anand with the white pieces, Kasparov with the black pieces, and the question of the week was Anand going to play the same stuff he'd been playing all week?
Well, it turned out that he did. He's opened with his favorite move, pawn to e4.
And Kasparov now studying the position. They're recording his move. And as is known, Kasparov loves to respond with the Sicilian defense, taking a few moments there before making his move, thinking about it, and he did respond with pawn to c5, the vaunted Sicilian defense.
That's right, Kasparov has had so much success playing the Sicilian. It's a great counter-attacking opening, so he's looking to land a big punch as well.
Anand not at all afraid, continuing in the same manner as he had in the past week, bringing his knight out there, Kasparov playing d6, and just wondering what is going to be new for this game was Kasparov.
Now, if we jump a few moves ahead in the game, we'll find that the moves have been repeated exactly from Game 3. So who's going to come up with the first new move?
Anand there considering the position and wondering what an opening specialist like Kasparov could come up with. And here, his bishops are well placed. The knight there attacking the bishop on d3.
So Kasparov has actually played the first new move. He's brought his bishop out and brought the rook into the center behind the black queen.
And Anand whipped out his response, queen to e2, bringing his queen off the back rank and connecting rooks.
Now, the point of Kasparov's rook move is that it gives his queen, when it's just hit there, it gives his queen a square to retreat to. It's just being attacked by the bishop.
Anand playing very quickly and calmly, aggressing the world champion in this game, looking for a win. He had missed a win in Game 3, and he was trying to revenge himself here.
So the queen just retreating there, it was hit by the bishop, and it drops back behind the rook. But look at that. It's the line in the middle of the board. The player's still no contact. They're still not crossing that line. White has these very nice center pawns, but he'd like to open them up to get that bishop working, but at the moment not possible. The knight hitting the bishop on c6.
And now exchanging the bishop was Kasparov, that deadly bishop that could have won the game the last time. Kasparov eager to get rid of it, and now it seemed as if the worst was behind him.
Well, just look at Kasparov there. You can tell he likes this position, that he thinks he's got something, maybe getting some advantage here. And he's broken with that pawn push in the center of the board. That's a great move.
That pawn push, a typical move in the Sicilian defense, opening up lines for his pieces there, the bishop getting ready to get in the battle. And after this move, Kasparov had no worries. Anand now playing his queen up to f3, trying to defend the position.
And that looks quite an insipid move. Black's knight dropping back, hitting the bishop on b6. So it looks like Kasparov in control. An exchange taking place on c6, where this opens up, could open up the line for Black's queen down towards the weak pawn.
And then the black queen leaping into the d6 square, and there Kasparov leaving the room as if to say, what are you going to do about this response? And Anand was feeling the heat.
Well, it's clear that Anand's opening preparation simply hasn't worked out here, and it's Kasparov who's managed to improve his game from week 1.
With all those pawns in the center of the board at Kasparov and his queen leaping into the action on the b4 square, attacking a lot of key points in White's position.
And now Kasparov advancing those center pawns. They could be very powerful indeed. Look at them. They control a lot of squares.
And it seemed as if Anand was just trying to defend, shifting his position back and forth, attacking with pawns and defending that center pawn in the middle of the board. And now Anand bearing down, eager to try to hold this position because he felt that maybe he would lose.
Yeah, he has to be very careful here. But in fact, he did come up with a very nice idea. The knight dropping back, hitting Kasparov's center pawn. And if the pawn advances, then that creates serious weakness. So you can see that the knight just adding to the pressure on the black pawn in the middle of the board.
Kasparov dropping back his bishop, but there was a lot of pressure on that center pawn. And Anand quickly liquidating, exchanging off those pawns in the middle of the board. And it seemed as if the tension now suddenly broke. Black still had the slight edge, though.
Yeah, maybe a slight advantage for Black. The queen on b4 standing pretty well. But after these exchanges, Anand relieves the pressure on his position. Kasparov can take a pawn there, he can take the bishop, but after these exchanges, it's looking like a fairly balanced position.
And in fact, the position had liquidated down, and the players stopping for a moment and after Anand captured the pawn in the middle of the board without much tension left, Kasparov hovering there and offering a draw to the surprise of the crowd, but in fact Anand accepted and the game had ended in a draw.
Well, another draw, but I think Kasparov has got to be pretty pleased with this game because he's neutralized Anand's opening preparation. Anand didn't come up with anything new.
Well, the score after game 5, no wins, and the score was tied at 2.5, 2.5. Welcome back to the 1995 Intel World Chess Championship at the observation deck on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center. And Danny, the crowd came looking for blood today.
Well, I think they're going to get it as well. Both players feeling the pressure. They've played 5 draws, and I think they really wanted to give the crowd something to talk about.
Well, Garry Kasparov with the white pieces, Viswanathan Anand with the black pieces, and Kasparov determined to do something with his white. He's known as a big server, like Pete Sampras with the serve, and he hadn't won a game yet.
And this is a clear indication that he's playing for a win. In his last few games before this match, he's played e4 against Anand and actually beaten him. So he's really going for it today, and he's playing the so-called Spanish opening, the Rey Lopez opening. Very aggressive indeed.
Clearly, Anand was aware of Kasparov's aggressive intentions for the day, e4 being Bobby Fischer's favorite killer move. And we jump ahead now to move 11, and the game had started to heat up.
This position, very well known to both players. It's a theoretical position. They will have been analyzing this at home with their seconds, with their analysts. Now here, you can see that black pawn in the center has played forward, opening up the line of the bishop. And now this move, an extraordinary move, moving the knight out. It can be taken by the queen. It's a sacrifice. It's been seen before, but then the queen would come out to f3 and all hell would break loose. So Anand prefers to just exchange the pawns there down on c3. There we go, that black pawn. But first, Kasparov exchanging off the bishop with his knight. Anand recaptures.
And now with complex play, mayhem on both sides of the board, Kasparov with a weak pawn, and suddenly Anand's queen leapt to the d3 square, towering on that square, and Kasparov quickly moving his knight out the way.
He's offering an exchange of queens, but Anand's queen move, that's very important indeed. It means that it's very difficult for Kasparov to build up an attack against Anand's king. So looks like a strong move.
And right there, Kasparov moving his queen out of the way, but Danny, not from fear, but because he wanted to attack the king.
Exactly. Look at Anand's king there. The pawns have advanced. That means black's king's a little bit insecure. So by keeping the queens on, Kasparov hopes to maintain attacking chances. Now, the line of the rook opening up there, attacking the pawn. Anand bringing his king up to defend that pawn.
But his king side was porous, looking very weak, and Kasparov started taking aim at that king. Kasparov in his element when he's on the attack.
But, well, it's still not so clear. Anand's queen in the center there is, for the moment, preventing Kasparov building up some kind of attack. So, very double-edged position.
And after that bishop move, looking to exchange off bishops, Kasparov was trying to remove some of the defenders away from the king. And now Kasparov quickly returning to the board, wondering what Anand had cooked up to try to defend against this ferocious attack.
Well, it's such a double-edged position. After this exchange, the pawn coming out, attacking the bishop, bishop exchanging, and now Kasparov trying to get in on these weakened squares around black's king, and he's moved the knight in to d4, attacking the pawn on e6 and threatening to bring his queen over, attacking black's king.
And Anand felt it was necessary to remove that dangerous knight by sacrificing his rook in the center of the board.
This is a very good move from Anand. He realized that he was going to go on the defensive, so he gives up a bit of material just to try and keep his king position secure.
And Kasparov quickly glancing at him there, wondering had his attack been beaten back with the vicious defensive move by Anand, and Kasparov spending quite a bit of time in this position. Yes, the weaknesses were there, but how could he penetrate down the open line? And those two pawns were looking to become queens then.
So can Kasparov build up an attack against the king? That's the question. But instead, he's offered to exchange queens. And in this way, he's corrected his pawn structure. His pawn structure has now improved. Look at those 3 pawns in the center of the board. He could try and advance those down the board later. And he also has an open line for his rook.
So now that pawn defended by the king coming into the game, and the position was double-edged. Now Kasparov bringing his king to the center of the board to try and slow up the march of those pawns on the left side. And so the position was extremely sharp, and suddenly a rook burst in on the 7th rank.
Well, this is such a tense position because Anand has a rook and a knight against 2 rooks. Now, normally the 2 rooks are stronger, but here, because Anand has those pawns at the side of the board, always threatening to march down, but Kasparov also has counterplay. He's trying to take pawns, but those black pawns, they're always threatening to march down the board, so Anand has serious counterplay here.
And Anand whipping out his pawn moves, and Kasparov also attacking the knight in the center of the board, and the game had reached its height. Neither side sure what was going on.
Well, this is an amazing decision. Kasparov actually offered a draw. Well, what a surprise. We thought that Kasparov was still going for the win here.
Well, the score was tied at 3-3. We were confused, and so was Anand.
Well, we both basically agreed with each other. We didn't have a clue what was going on, so basically.
Well, Vishy and all the other grandmasters, we took a look at it, and it was complete madness on the board.
It certainly was, and in fact, Kasparov felt that he was possibly winning in the final position and was a bit disgusted with himself for offering a draw.
Later, Anand felt the same thing, that Kasparov had an advantage, and he was somewhat relieved.
Well, when we played the game out, all we ended up getting was a draw as well. There we go, black's pawn very dangerous, but white managing to get some kind of perpetual check against black's king.
Game 7, Anand with the white pieces, Kasparov with the black pieces, and the question was, who was going to come up with a new move of this game?
Well, we've jumped a few moves ahead in the game, and Anand's seconds have been working for the last couple of games to cook up some big improvement. And here it is. He tried to blow open Kasparov's kingside right out of the opener.
A spectacular move, e5, never before seen in this position, and Kasparov studying, wondering what was in store, and he took the pawn in the center of the board.
But, I mean, this is such a dangerous position. One false move from Kasparov, and he could go down. Now you see the pawn attacking the knight. Kasparov captures the pawn on e5. Anand has opened up the line of the bishop. Very dangerous indeed. Kasparov always has to watch out for a sacrifice.
And the knight jumping to the center of the board, and the whole place was abuzz after Anand captured knight takes d5.
Now Kasparov has a choice of how to recapture this knight or pawn. He recaptured with the pawn. That means that he's opened up the line of the bishop. He has a little bit more freedom, but also he can still try and take that bishop.
And now rook to e1 defended his weak pawn, Anand, in the center of the board, and then h6 by Kasparov controlling the g5 square.
Well, h6 was a very clever move indeed. That really prevented any attacking chances that Anand might have had on the king side. A brilliant move from Kasparov.
And Anand looking very frustrated. His initial opening plan not successful at all, so now he had to backtrack and play the move c3, attacking the knight on b4.
Okay, so the knight attacked. Surely Kasparov will take the bishop. There we go. That very dangerous attacking piece, so he's just exchanged it off.
And now the queen capturing back, and there was some pressure on the weak pawn on d5, and the question was, would Kasparov stop to defend that pawn, especially with a lethal bishop on b6 in his position?
So it looked as though Anand was getting some initiative, but Kasparov didn't defend the pawn. He just went to exchange off that bishop instead.
So a dramatic pawn sacrifice. The question was, would Anand take it? And Anand coming back to the board as Kasparov feeling very confident about his last move.
Well, I think Anand was rather surprised by that move. Very good strategy from Kasparov. He's not going to be tied down defending that pawn. He just goes for activity instead.
And the queen capturing the pawn, so temporarily Kasparov was a pawn down and his bishop was under attack by the white queen.
Okay, but obviously Kasparov has seen this far, and he found a very good response. Bishop comes out, attacking the queen.
The queen under attack at the moment. The queen had to backtrack, but still, Anand was up an extra pawn. The question was, would Kasparov be able to get it back?
The queen must retreat. Can't take the bishop. It's covered by the rook, so the queen just dropping back.
And now Kasparov exchanging off that dangerous bishop in his position, and it seemed as if the worst was over, especially with that weak white pawn in an advanced position.
So white temporarily a pawn up, but now Kasparov brings the rook up, attacking the pawn, and it's very difficult for Anand to defend it.
The pawn under attack, as a matter of fact, it was too advanced with that very strong bishop of Kasparov's versus the weak knight of Anand's, it didn't look as if white had any real advantage.
No, none at all. And that pawn, that advanced pawn on e5, could also even turn out to be weak.
And Anand bringing his rook up to a4, with Kasparov now able to just take the pawn off on b6, wondering what he was going to do in this position.
Well, I think Anand has played correctly there. Instead of trying to hold on to that pawn, which would really be in vain, he's improving the position of his pieces. I really like that rook move.
Great rook move, getting ready to swing the rook over to the center of the board. Anand looking very calm. This rook able to just dart to the d4 square and get a lot of control along the d file.
That's right. I think this really prevents, there we go, Kasparov taking the pawn. But this rook maneuver, once the rook comes over into the center, it controls that crucial line in the middle of the board. Now, although Kasparov has a slight advantage of the bishop against the knight, it's not really going to be enough. The rook stands so well in the center of the board.
And the players agreed to a draw for the 7th draw in a row, and sitting chatting like old friends.
There's certainly none of the animosity that we've seen in previous World Championship matches. Seem to be getting on well.
Well, the score was tied at 3.5, 3.5, and Kasparov seemed content with the final result of the game.
Black probably slightly better, but you know, he takes D line, and basically it's not much I can do. You know, I looked at the position. I didn't see any plan to improve it, and you know, just I was quite pleased, you know, just to equalize easily.
And afterwards, an upbeat Kasparov was even discussing previous games.
It's very unusual for players at this level to be so open with their analysis.
There we see the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts on New York's Upper West Side. And back downtown to the World Trade Center, where a magnificent crowd gathered for Game 8.
Well, they were really expecting a great battle today, and we were all hungry for a winner.
Garry Kasparov with the white pieces, Viswanathan Anand with the black pieces. And with 7 draws in a row, it seemed like this game was going to be extremely tense.
And what a crocodile smile from Kasparov. You can bet he's got something really strong prepared.
Well, he began again with Bobby Fischer's old favorite move, pawn to e4, and this really showed that he had aggressive intentions.
In the first few games with white, Kasparov played knight f3, he played pawn to d4, and only tried to get a very slight advantage. But in this game, in the previous game where he played white, he's played pawn to e4, and he showed that he really had some very interesting preparation ready.
And here he started with the Scotch game, playing the pawn to d4. He played a couple of times before, and now the position was much more wide open. His knight in a centralized position, and his pawn very aggressive in the middle of the board.
So Kasparov just exchanging knights there. This has all been seen before, and in fact, Kasparov has used this in a previous World Championship match against Karpov in 1990 and scored a really significant victory.
Well, the queen attacking down the E line, so Kasparov moving his queen to E2, and then Anand's knight leaping to D5, Kasparov attacking with the move C4.
Garry Kasparov just walking out there, going back to his dressing room, leaving Anand to spew at the board. Black's knight attacked in the center of the board, so Anand brings his bishop out. If the pawn captures the knight, the bishop comes down to take the queen.
And now, after B3, Anand played a spectacular move. This move had never been seen before. Pawn to G5, and this really stunned Kasparov. He had to sit and think for a while, and the crowd was abuzz over this move. What a magnificent idea. Pawn to G5.
It's a tremendous move, and it's really shocked Kasparov. You can see him there looking very worried indeed. Now, you'd have expected Kasparov with the white pieces to come out with something rather unexpected. It's Anand with his pawn move G5, controlling the F4 square.
Bishop attacking the queen, and Anand responding quickly by blocking with the move D6.
All hell breaking loose in the center now. White capturing, attacking the queen.
And now that attack forced Anand to exchange queens on E2, and the chessboard was totally wild.
So Black's knight in the center of the board still attacked by White's pawn on C4, but Anand didn't do anything about it.
Anand with the incredible response, bishop to G7, and he gave a quick glance there at Kasparov as if to say, look at this tremendous move, and Kasparov was intrigued. Look at that face, as if to say, what's going on?
In fact, Anand was still playing these moves very quickly indeed, so an indication he's still in his home analysis.
It's incredible, whipping out all these moves with the two players, and that bishop laser-like on that diagonal, and the rook could go nowhere at all.
But first of all, Anand had to capture the bishop on e2. Now Kasparov recapturing, and only then does he take the rook in the corner. There you go, the bishop right in the corner there, taking the rook.
So Anand had an advantage, but then Kasparov banged down the move, rook to c1, and he seemed quite pleased with himself, getting up, leaving the board, and leaving Anand to analyze this new situation.
If we just recap the material balance, Kasparov has a rook and a knight. Anand has 2 rooks, so Anand should have a material advantage.
And then Anand played an absolutely spectacular move, castling right into the fire of White's pieces.
Now the rook crashing through, attacking the pawn in front of Anand's king.
And now Anand moving with his rook to check Kasparov's king, and the king had to sidestep up to d3.
So now the rook coming forward just to defend that pawn in front of the king.
And Anand feeling a bit more comfortable in the situation. He had protected himself sufficiently, and Kasparov a bit concerned because now it seemed as if the tide was shifting a bit in Anand's favor.
Somehow Kasparov had to find a way to bring his knight into the attack.
And trying to support that rook was that knight thinking about hopping into b5, so Anand ripped it off the board, removing the important piece, and now Kasparov capturing with his king.
So we had an exchange for bishop and knight, which leaves the situation 2 rooks against a rook and a bishop. Rook coming forward, attacking the pawn.
And the king defending the pawn, and Kasparov now eagerly looking at the board, trying to figure out if he had finally saved himself down in position and in material, but maybe he could balance the situation. And right here, Danny, Anand went into a long think over this next move.
Well, he couldn't quite see a way forward. He just checked the king backwards, but this wasn't really making progress. Normally 2 rooks, better than a rook and a bishop, but here, White's pawn's so active in the center, but Anand's just looking to attack that pawn on d5. There you go. So they've repeated the position. He can't actually make progress.
And that's one way that chess players offer a draw. By making the same moves over, they agree that neither side could do anything better.
Anand could have tried to play for a win by moving the rook down, but then the bishop would come across to defend the pawn, so he rejected the idea.
And repeating moves was Anand. Kasparov well aware of this as a draw offer, so he agreed to a draw after some pretty spectacular fireworks then.
I thought this was a brilliant game. The gloves were really off. Both players were going for the win, all out.
And so after the end of the second week of play, the score was knotted at 4-4, a record-breaking 8 consecutive draws at the beginning of a match. And Anand no longer seemed intimidated by Kasparov's legendary board presence.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how far this preparation went.
Did you feel that though that you had the advantage after the opening?
Well, certainly after I castled long, he had to find this move to drop knight d3. But after this, he gets this bishop on c5, b4 kind of structure, and I think he's holding an exchange now.
Okay, I thought that that he could draw.
Yes.
Well, I thought there were several ways that he could draw that were simpler than what he played. He thought for about 30 minutes here. I thought he could, in this position. And what do you think about the position after rook e2? I mean, you thought that
I thought bishop c5.
maybe it was too double-edged, and or just that you wouldn't make any progress after.
Unless I really push it, with f5, a5, I really try to undermine this bishop. Then well, this is pretty much where we're going to be. Swing this guy somewhat. Yeah. And I just didn't see how I could do better. I mean, he puts the pawn on d6, so leaves it here for a while, puts the rook on f5, shuffles the thing down.
The move where you cast on the queen side, why did you not go bishop to, I think it was e5?
He takes with the rook on c6.
It's back where we started, right?
Such a position, which is basically what I'm playing for the game.
Right.
This is the best move, I think, here. Knight a3. But it keeps the option of going here or here. So, and this is just very bad for black.
Okay, Vishy. So, end of week 2. How are you feeling about the match? Are you satisfied?
More or less. I mean, I've played some good games, and yeah, I mean, there's a kind of balance, but it's okay.
How long ago did you discover that one? I mean, that was a real shocker today, G5.
Yeah, I mean, well, we had to find something in these 3 months, and we looked at G5, but yeah, I mean, it's a incredibly complicated variation, and well, we thought it'd be quite nice. Actually, we you know, had to look at lots of different openings. So I think in general my preparation was quite good.
Did you feel you were in any kind of trouble today?
Not really, but I had to at some point I realized that castles are simply the only move. If I don't castle, I think I'm just much worse.
And what kind of impression do you get about Kasparov? Do you feel normally, you know, you feel some kind of intimidation at the board, or well, a lot of players do. Do you feel his presence at the board, especially during this match, or do you think he's stronger or weaker than usually when you play him?
Well, I mean, already after 8 games, you just get used to this presence. I mean, most times at tournaments you have the guy once, you know, during the entire event, and maybe that explains that feeling. But after 8 games, it just feels like my opponent.